My brother found me sitting on the curb outside a Dollar General on Route 17, my 18-month-old daughter asleep across my lap, her cheek red from the sun. I had been there for 40 minutes. I didn't have my phone. I didn't have my wallet. I didn't have my car. He pulled up in his pickup, took one look at me, and said nothing for a long moment. Just stood there with the door open and the engine running. "Where's your car, Nora?" I looked up at him and said what I had been too ashamed to say to anyone for almost a year. "My mother-in-law took it." She said I wasn't emotionally stable enough to drive. The look on his face wasn't anger, not yet. It was something worse. It was recognition. Like he had been piecing something together quietly for months, and the last piece just landed. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I always love knowing who's in our community. The inside of my brother's truck smelled like coffee and sawdust. He's a contractor. Always has a measuring tape clipped to the sun visor and a half-eaten granola bar in the cup holder. Normal, ordinary things. I hadn't been around normal, ordinary things in a long time, and I almost started crying just from that. My daughter Lily was still asleep. I had the buckle done before he finished pulling out of the lot. He didn't ask questions right away, he just drove. I stared at the road and tried to figure out where to begin because the beginning didn't look like abuse. That's the thing I need you to understand before anything else. It never does. It started with his mother, Renee, offering to help. My husband, Joel, and I had just moved into a house in his hometown in central Ohio, about 2 hours from where I grew up. We had a newborn. I was 28, exhausted, breastfeeding at 3 a.m. every night and barely keeping it together. When Renee showed up with a week's worth of freezer meals and said, "Honey, you need rest, let me take a few night shifts," I was so grateful I could have wept. I should have known something was off when she didn't leave after the week. But I was tired, and Jewel said she was just being a good grandmother, and I told myself I was being ungrateful. That's how it starts. They hand you something you genuinely need: food, sleep, help with the baby, and they do it right at the moment when you are most desperate and most likely to say yes. And then the help never quite ends, and the presence that started as relief slowly becomes something else entirely. By the time Lily was 4 months old, Renee had a key to our house. Joel said it was practical. What if there was an emergency? By 6 months, she was coming over every morning without calling first. By 8 months, she was moving her things into the spare bedroom. Temporarily, Joel said. Just until her lease was up. The lease ended. Renee stayed. I remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong, but let me tell you about the 2 moments before it that I told myself were fine. Because this is the part no one talks about. The way you rationalize, the way you file the warning signs in a folder in your brain labeled overreacting, and you just keep going. The first one, I came home from a rare 2-hour trip to the grocery store alone. Renee had offered to watch Lily, and I had jumped at the chance for any time to myself. And I walked in to find Renee had reorganized my kitchen. Entirely. Every cabinet. All the places I had put things were wrong now, apparently. She said she didn't want me to struggle to find things. I said thank you. I put Lily to sleep and cried in the bathroom for 15 minutes and told myself I was hormonal. The second one? Joel came home from work one evening and I was telling him about my day, and I mentioned casually that I'd been thinking about looking for part-time work again, just a few hours a week, something to feel like myself. He nodded slowly and then said, "I think you should talk to Mom about that first. She knows what it takes to raise a baby right." Just like that, talked to his mother about whether I was allowed to work. I told myself he meant well, that it wasn't the way it sounded. The third moment is the one where I stopped lying to myself. It was a Tuesday. Joel was at work. Renee was in my kitchen making Lily's lunch, which she had started doing every day without being asked. I came downstairs in my own home and reached for my car keys on the hub by the door, and they weren't there. I asked Renee where they were. She turned around from the stove and gave me that smile she had. Patient. Like she was talking to a child. "Joel and I talked about it, and we both feel like you've been really scattered lately. You almost backed into the mailbox last week." I did almost back into the mailbox. Once. Because Lily had been screaming in the car seat and I was distracted. "We just want to make sure you're safe," she said. "I'll drive you anywhere you need to go." Just let me know. I stood in my own kitchen in my own house and looked at this woman who had taken my keys, and I thought, this is not help. But I didn't say that. Because in the past 8 months, I had been trained, very carefully, not to say that. If I pushed back, Joel called it mood swings. You're still dealing with postpartum stuff, babe. It makes sense that you'd feel defensive. If I raised my voice even slightly, Renee would go very quiet and very wounded, and Joel would later find me and tell me I needed to be gentler with his mother because she was only trying to help. If I cried, they both looked at each other in that particular way. The way that said, she's not stable, and I had learned to hate myself for crying. I hadn't talked to my brother in 6 weeks. I had been pulling away from everyone slowly, not because I wanted to, because every time I got off the phone with someone from my real life, Joel would ask what we talked about, and then later there would be a comment from Renee about how spending too much time dwelling on your old life makes it harder to build your new one. And it was just easier to pull back than to manage the aftermath. The boiling frog, my brother called it later when I finally explained. He'd heard the metaphor somewhere. If you put a frog in water that's already boiling, it jumps straight out. But if you put it in cold water and heat it slowly, it doesn't realize it's dying until it's already cooked. That's not a story about frogs being stupid. It's a story about how escalation works. How things that would be completely unacceptable if done all at once feel survivable when done 1 degree at a time. The degree after the car keys, my phone. Joel set up parental controls. He said it was so Lily couldn't accidentally make calls or purchases if she ever got hold of it. The controls limited my outgoing calls to a pre-approved list. My brother's number wasn't on it. My best friend from college wasn't on it. My mother, my own mother, wasn't on it. I asked Joel to add them. He said he would. He didn't. I asked again. He said I was obsessing. He said I needed to focus on being present for Lily instead of always trying to be somewhere else. The degree after that, our joint account. Joel sat me down one evening, very calm, very reasonable, and explained that he'd moved our money into a new account structure that made more sense from a budgeting standpoint. He was good at that, making financial rearrangements sound like they were for my benefit. He's an IT project manager. He's comfortable with systems and spreadsheets and the language of efficiency. The new structure meant everything went through an account I could view but couldn't withdraw from without a secondary approval that went to his phone. He called it a safeguard. I called it nothing. Out loud. Internally, I called it what it was. The day he found me on the curb outside the Dollar General, I had walked there. 40 minutes, with Lily in the carrier, because I needed diapers and I knew Renee kept a box in the back of her car that she had decided we would use now instead of the brand I'd been buying. The brand I'd been buying wasn't the right kind, apparently. I had 60 cents in my pocket, not enough for diapers. I hadn't had access to our bank account in 4 months. I sat on that curb and I thought, I am 30 years old. I have a bachelor's degree. I ran the marketing department of a mid-sized company before I took maternity leave. I am sitting on a curb with 60 cents because I asked the wrong person to help me. My brother had driven past on his way to a job site. He almost didn't see me. He told me later that he almost convinced himself it wasn't me. Because why would his sister be sitting on a curb in the heat with a sleeping baby and no car and no phone? He turned around anyway. In the truck, once Lily was buckled and the AC was blowing and I had finished telling him about the keys and the phone and the account, my brother was quiet for a long time. He's not an emotional guy. He expresses things through doing rather than talking. He fixes things, he builds things, he solves things. But his hands were tight on the steering wheel and I could see the muscle working in his jaw. How long? He asked. About 9 months. Since Lily was old enough to sleep through the night and I didn't technically need the help anymore. Why didn't you call me? I had been ready for that question and I still didn't have a clean answer. Because I thought it wasn't bad enough yet, and then it got worse, and I was embarrassed. And then it got worse again, and I didn't have a phone that could call you. He pulled over into the parking lot of a hardware store he knew and put the truck in park. Turned to look at me. He's 6 years older than me, and he has our dad's face. And for a second, I couldn't look directly at him because I missed our dad so much it was a physical thing. This is not a marriage problem, he said. What you just described to me is not two people not getting along. What you just described is a controlled environment. You have no transportation, no money, no outside contact. Nora, that's a hostage situation. I had known it. I had known it for months, but something about hearing it in someone else's voice, someone I trusted, someone outside the bubble, made it real in a way it hadn't been when it was just my own thought. I need to go back, I said. Lily's things, we're going back, he said. But not to talk. We're going to get your documents and your daughter's things. That's it. You are not sleeping in that house tonight. He's a contractor. His work is about knowing which walls are structural and which ones you can knock down. He had already made the assessment. He was working. The driveway looked exactly the same as it always did. Joel's car was in the garage, which meant he was home early. Renee's sedan was out front. My brother's truck looked like it didn't belong in that driveway, and he was right, it didn't. Neither did I anymore. Renee saw us first. She was on the back porch with a glass of iced tea and their phone, and the expression she wore when she wanted to look unbothered. It didn't reach her eyes. Nora, she said pleasantly, I was just about to text Joel to see if you'd be back for dinner. She looked at my brother. Patrick! It's been a while. My brother didn't respond to that. Where is Joel? Inside. A pause. Is everything okay? We're going to get Nora's things. Joel appeared in the doorway behind Renee before she could answer. He looked at my brother first, then at me, and I watched his expression go through 3 phases in about 2 seconds. Surprise, calculation, then the careful neutrality that I had come to understand was his working face when he decided how to handle something. Hey, he said it lightly. What's going on? I was starting to get worried. You've been gone a few hours. I've been sitting outside the Dollar General for 40 minutes, I said. I didn't have a way to call you. He moved his jaw slightly. You should have asked Mom for the car. I'm going to get my things, I said, and Lily's things, and her medical records and her birth certificate and my social security card and passport. The lightness dropped off his face. Nora, let's talk about this inside. He took a step toward me. My brother moved between us. Not aggressively, just placed himself there. Stood with his arms at his sides. He didn't need to posture. He's 210 pounds and he's been swinging a hammer since he was 16. And more than that, he is the face of someone who has already decided and is just waiting for you to catch up. Under Ohio law? My brother said, and I didn't know until later that he had pulled out his phone in the truck and looked us up while I was tending to Lily. Withholding a spouse's identification documents is considered a form of domestic abuse. Restricting their access to marital funds can constitute financial abuse. And preventing a parent from leaving a residence with their child is unlawful restraint. He looked at Joel steadily. I'd like you to not be in this doorway. Renee made a sound behind him. This is ridiculous. She is his wife. She's been struggling since the baby, and we've been doing everything we can to support her. You took her car keys, my brother said. He didn't raise his voice. You limited her phone? She had 60 cents. She was sitting on a curb. Renee opened her mouth, closed it. I'm going inside, I said. Joel reached for my arm and my brother said very quietly, don't. I went inside, I went upstairs, I didn't fold anything. I grabbed Lily's bag from the closet and shoved in onesies and her sleep sack and a specific stuffed rabbit she couldn't sleep without. The small brown one with the worn ear, not the new one Renee had bought. I grabbed my own bag and threw in whatever I could reach. I opened the fire safe in the closet shelf, thought I didn't know the combination. But I'd watched him open it twice, and I have a good memory. And I took out my passport, my social security card, Lily's birth certificate, our marriage certificate. Then I stood in the closet for 10 seconds and did the thing I'd been preparing to do for 6 weeks. I reached into the back corner of the top shelf, behind a box of old tax returns, and I took out the manila envelope. I had started collecting things the night I realized what was happening to our money. It was about 5 months into Renee living with us. Joel had left his laptop open on the kitchen table while he went to take a shower. I was feeding Lily. I glanced at the screen. There were 2 browser tabs open. One was a bank transfer confirmation, and one was a credit card account in a name I recognized but didn't expect to see. His mother's name. The transfer was from our joint account, $1,200, labeled household expenses. I had seen similar entries for 4 months and thought they were utilities, groceries, gas, the things a household runs on. I pulled up the last 4 months of transfers on his laptop, Lily still nursing, my hands shaking. It wasn't household expenses. It was debt payments, on accounts I'd never seen, in Renee's name. I started photographing documents, carefully. When Joel was at work and Renee was out, bank statements, transfer confirmations, a personal loan document I found in the home office filing cabinet, $22,000, dated 6 months after we got married, with my name on it, my signature, which I had never signed. I had a real estate attorney I'd done some marketing work for before my maternity leave. I managed to call her from a store landline one afternoon when I was out with Lily. The one time per week Renee let me take the car to the farmer's market. She told me what I was looking at. She used specific words: forgery, fraud, financial abuse. She told me what to keep. She told me what would matter. I kept everything. When I came back downstairs with Lily on my hip and the duffel over my shoulder, my brother was standing in the living room. Joel was behind him by the kitchen door. Renee was on the couch with her arms crossed. Joel looked at the bag, looked at the envelope in my hand. "What is that?" he asked. "I'm leaving," I said. "You are not taking my daughter." "I am taking my daughter." I looked at him, this person I had married at 26 on a sunny Saturday in September, and I felt nothing that I expected to feel. No grief, no longing, just clarity. "And I'm going to tell you why you are going to let me." I opened the envelope and walked it over to him. Bank statements, transfer records, the loan document with the forged signature, photographs the Renee's credit card account showing where the money had gone. He looked at the top page. His color changed. "That's 14 months of transfers from our joint account," I said, "totaling approximately $31,000, all going to accounts in your mother's name. And this," I pulled out the loan document, "is a $22,000 personal loan that I didn't sign and didn't know about until 4 months ago, in my name, that you have been making payments on from my credit line." "Nora." His voice had gone strange, careful. "I added it up," I said. "With the car I couldn't use and the account I couldn't access and the phone I couldn't use to call my own family. You were keeping me from leaving, and now I'm going. And you can spend tonight deciding whether you want to work this out with lawyers or whether you want me to take this file to the Montgomery County DA's office in the morning." Renee stood up. "She's lying. She doesn't understand the finances. She never has." My brother said, very pleasantly, "Ma'am, I would strongly suggest you stop talking right now." We walked out. The drive to my brother's house was 40 minutes on the highway. Lily woke up 20 minutes in and looked out the window at the sky going pink, pointing at things, making her sounds. My brother didn't talk. I was grateful for that. When we got to his house, his wife Donna was standing in the kitchen and she took one look at me and she just opened her arms. I stood there for a while. Then we sat down at the kitchen table and I spread everything out and my brother called his wife's cousin who does family law in Columbus. The attorney looked over everything on a video call that night. She was thorough. She asked good questions. At the end, she said, "The forged loan document alone is a Class D felony under Ohio law. The repeated unauthorized transfers from a joint marital account are chargeable as theft. I can file for an emergency protective order tomorrow morning that will give you full physical custody of your daughter pending a hearing." I asked about the money. She said she couldn't promise I'd get all of it back. Marital asset disputes take time. But she said the documentary evidence I had was unusually strong. She said the word unusually twice. I thought about those months photographing documents. The lawyer I called from a store phone. The manila envelope and the box of tax returns. 6 weeks of waiting for the right moment. I wasn't a woman who had survived 9 months of control. I was a woman who had spent 6 of those months quietly building a case. Joel and Renee came to my brother's house 2 days later with a different lawyer and a lot of noise. Joel said I had abandoned the marriage. His attorney started talking about what a custody fight would look like. I slid the folder across my brother's kitchen table. They went quiet. I said, "I want my name off the fraudulent loan. I want my portion of the marital assets in a separate account by the end of the week. I want a separation agreement signed by Friday that gives me primary custody and child support per Ohio guidelines. If I have the signed agreement by Friday, I don't file the criminal complaint on Monday. Joel's attorney asked for a moment with his client. They stepped into the hallway. They came back in 11 minutes. Joel signed everything on Friday. His attorney looked like she'd had a long week. Renee wasn't there. 6 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of my own apartment. Small, second floor of a 2-story building in a town 20 minutes from my brother. A little yard in the back where Lily has learned to walk on grass and chase the neighbor's dog along the fence line. My name on the lease. My name on the utility accounts. My car, a used Civic I bought with the first installment of the marital asset settlement, parked in my own spot. The loan in my name was dissolved as part of the agreement. My credit took a hit but is recovering. Joel is facing a civil case for the fraudulent loan separate from the agreement, which his attorney apparently told him was coming regardless. Renee quietly moved back to her own apartment in Dayton. I got a part-time remote position with a nonprofit doing communications work. 20 hours a week while Lily naps and after she goes to sleep. I'm rebuilding. One evening, a few weeks after I moved in, my brother came over to help me hang some shelves. He's like that. He stood in my kitchen afterward with a cup of coffee and looked around at the apartment. The Lily drawings already on the fridge, the overflowing dish rack, the laundry basket I hadn't dealt with yet. You doing okay? He asked. Yeah, I said. I'm doing okay. He nodded. We didn't need more than that. There's something I want to say to anyone who is listening to this and recognizing something. Not because I have a tidy lesson to offer, but because I spent a long time telling myself that what was happening to me wasn't bad enough to count, that it didn't look like the thing you're supposed to leave, that I should be able to handle it, fix it, be less sensitive, communicate better, try harder. What I know now is this: control doesn't announce itself. It brings you a casserole. It says, let me help. It turns the heat up so slowly that by the time you understand what's happening, you can't remember what it felt like to be warm. But you can still find your way out. You can be terrified and still be building your exit. You can be in it and still be collecting what you need. The best move I ever made wasn't leaving. The best move I made was the night I picked up that camera on my phone, with my daughter in my arms, and started keeping receipts. I wasn't grateful for the cage anymore. I think about the night I stood in my kitchen, not my own kitchen yet, my brother's, and spread all those documents across the table under the overhead light. Bank statements, a loan I never signed, transfer records going back 14 months. Lily was asleep in the next room. I could hear her breathing through the baby monitor Patrick's wife had dug out of a closet. What I kept coming back to was this: none of what happened to me was an accident. Every step had a logic to it. Renee offered help when I was most exhausted and least likely to ask questions. Joel structured the finances when I was focused on a newborn and trusted him completely. The phone restrictions came after the account restrictions, because by then I had already been trained to explain away small things. None of it was random, it was calculated, and the way out had the same quality. It was also not an accident. I made a choice in the middle of all of it to pay attention, to look at what was actually happening instead of what I was being told was happening, to trust what I could see and document over what I was being told to feel. That choice is what made the difference. Not luck, not timing, not my brother happening to drive past the right parking lot on the right afternoon, though that mattered too. But if I hadn't spent 6 weeks building that file, driving past in a truck would have just meant I got a ride home to the same situation. There's something I've been turning over since then about the difference between enduring something and understanding it. I endured those 9 months, but what actually saved Lily and me was the period when I stopped just enduring and started thinking clearly about what was true, what I could prove, and what I would need. That shift, from surviving to strategizing, is the thing I'd want anyone in a similar place to hold on to. Your mind works even when everything around you is designed to make you doubt it. Use it. The hardest part wasn't leaving. The hardest part was the months before, when I had to hold what I knew quietly and not let them see that I knew it. That took a kind of discipline I didn't know I had. Every morning I woke up in that house and acted like everything was the same, while at night I was photographing documents and calling a lawyer from a store landline. There's a version of strength that nobody applauds because it's invisible. It doesn't look like courage. It looks like compliance. But it was the only move I had, and I made it. What Joel and Renee did had consequences: legal ones, financial ones, ones that are still playing out in a courtroom I don't have to sit in anymore. That's not something I engineered. It's something that followed naturally from what they chose to do. Actions accumulate. The things you do to another person don't disappear because you're confident or because you've gotten away with them before. They sit in a folder under a box of tax returns, waiting. And the thing I want Lily to know, when she's old enough, is that her mother was afraid and did it anyway. That being scared doesn't disqualify you from being smart. That you can be in the worst situation of your life and still be building your way out of it, one photograph at a time. I wasn't grateful for the cage anymore, but I was grateful for what I learned inside it.